سلام لخ مريم مليف طيبوثة نارا عماخ مريخات المشي وموريخ بيرت خرسيغي شو ناط مريم يلدت آلها صلح لا بين حطاهي هاشا وشاف الموثين آمين.
Yes, I'm Father Luis Montes, a missionary priest from the Institute of the Incarnate Word, which is a congregation founded not too long ago, in the year 1984. It has already spread to all 7 continents, and we have a lot of foundations in the Middle East. I have been in the Middle East for 20 years. These last 6 years, I have been in Iraq, which is where I am now. In Iraq, there's the community of Christ the King in Baghdad, and there are 2 priests there, Father Cortes and my brother Enrique, who is also a priest. Father Jorge Cortes is the vicar of the bishop's diocese and is also the exorcist of the diocese. And he's the parish priest of the Cathedral of the Latin Rite. They're in charge of the work in the Latin Rite Cathedral, and they also have other apostolic work with other congregations like the Sisters of Mother Teresa, or the consecrated laywomen who run a nursing home for the elderly, or the Daughters of Mary, or other chapels in the city. They also work intensely with the refugees in the Virgin Mary refugee camp in Baghdad. A few months ago I moved here from Kurdistan, and I'm now living in Erbil in the house that belongs to the Carmelites, and I'm here to restart the apostolate with the Catholics from the Latin Rite. There are very few Catholics from this rite here in Iraq who are locals or Iraqis, but there are tens of thousands of foreign workers who have had very little pastoral attention, until at last the bishop was able to find a group of priests who were able to work with them, of which I am the main leader. But we also have the help of 2 Jesuit priests who come every once in a while to Iraq to help out with the refugees, the Dominican priests and the Dominican sisters. This is our pastoral team. The idea is to rectify this apostolate in English as well as in Arabic in the capital of this region, which is Erbil, and then also in Duyak, which is another important city. Sulaymaniyah and Kirkuk, if things settle down there, because it's very dangerous in Kirkuk right now. One of the missions that we have is to build a church that would be the Latin Rite parish in Erbil, because right now there's not a single parish of this rite in all of Iraqi Kurdistan. There was one in Mosul, but as you can imagine, it doesn't exist anymore. Not just because there aren't any more Christians in Mosul, but because the very church which belonged to the Dominicans was blown up by the Islamic State and is completely destroyed. So now we have to start over. Yes, in order to explain, you have to understand the situation in all of Iraq. Iraq is divided right now in 3 zones: Mosul and the cities of the province of Al-Anbar, then Kurdistan, which is pretty safe. In Erbil there aren't many attacks, in Dayuk there aren't many attacks, but the problem is that it's pretty close to where the Islamic State is, and so the war has made the economy collapse. For months the public workers are out of work. Thousands of public or private constructions, buildings, everything is at a standstill. There's the burden of the refugees, who are more than 1 million. There are only 100,000 Christians, but there are tons who aren't Christians. And so this situation is a disaster. And lastly, there's the Shiite region of the country, which is Baghdad and all the southern part. There are attacks there almost every day. Since 2003, it's calculated that there are at least 20 attacks every day in the country. It's completely inhumane. And so if there are 20 attacks every day in the capital, you can imagine that in the capital there is practically 1 attack every day. And there are a lot of attacks every week and every month. It's not 5 attacks every week. Sometimes there are 5 in just one day. The last official statistic that I heard is that in October of 2015, for example, there were 128 attacks in 1 month. It's a very difficult situation with a lot of insecurity. From the beginning, we knew that the Islamic State was not going to be able to enter into Baghdad because it's a Shiite city. The Islamic State entered in the Sunni cities in the province of Al-Anbar because the cities welcomed them in. The Islamic State was tired of the disastrous winter the year before with the Prime Minister. But it was impossible for them to take over Baghdad. In fact, when the Islamic State took over Mosul, the Shiites sent out to recruit more militia, and 5,000 Shiite volunteers arrived every week. It was impossible for them to take over Baghdad. But the attacks happen all the time. Sometimes they're very big ones, like the one that happened just a few months ago, with a truck full of explosives. More than 300 people died. There were 20 people missing. 20 people missing in an attack means that there was no trace left of them. The explosion was so strong that not even a finger escaped to be able to trace the DNA. It's terrible. And then there are a lot of smaller attacks, like killing someone behind their back. But it causes you to live in an atmosphere of insecurity all the time because they don't just attack the church. Someone can die just going to buy vegetables at the market or when they go out for a walk at any moment. It's normal for us. If nothing has happened to us, and it's already been a few years, it's normal to find out that there was an attack in a certain place at a certain time 2 hours later than when we had passed by there. It's all very normal, typical. But anyways, it's true that literally speaking, we haven't suffered any scratches. Even though there have been many attacks close by, God protects us, and He's the one who decides when our time has come. Yes, the challenges that have to do with the pastoral mission in these countries are difficult and they keep adding up. The first one is being in a country where the Muslims are a majority and where there is discrimination and persecution of Christianity. But this is common in practically all of the Arabic and Muslim countries, even in the countries that are so-called moderate. The word moderate is a euphemism. They say that Egypt is a Muslim country that is moderate. But every year there are dozens or even up to 100 of Christians killed there for their faith. Every year, no one hears about it, but that's it, that's what happens. And so this is something in common with our apostolate that we've had in other Arabic countries where the Christians are a minority. You have to add on top of that the insecurity in the city of Baghdad that complicates pastoral activities, as is obvious. But even so, just so you can understand, because someone could think with so many attacks and so many limitations, it's impossible to do anything. It's not impossible to do anything. Inside the parish walls, we organize lots of activities. Our life as parish priests is similar to the life of a parish priest from any other part of the world, celebrating Mass, confessions, preaching, preparing children for catechism classes, meetings with women to organize adoration, youth groups, visiting the sick, bringing them communion, visiting the Christians. All of this happens, but of course in a more limited and careful way. We have guards at the door, the risk of leaving because it's a risk when you walk out the door. Yesterday, a bomb exploded nearby here. All this causes certain limitations. But on the other hand, you have to do what you have to do, because if not, what are we here for? And so on one hand, we lead a very intense pastoral life, and it's common for the religious and the priest to not want to leave. People ask us, why do you stay here? And the truth is that it's a strange question. Why are we going to leave? Because it's dangerous? Jesus says, preach the gospel to all nations. He doesn't say, only in the countries where there isn't war or persecution. To think of leaving when that's when people need you the most is for us a completely strange thought. And it's not just because we are missionary priests. Other priests and religious don't want to leave either, they want to stay. And not just to work with people who are so fantastic, who are persecuted, and give good example, but because God has put us in this place, and we have to do good wherever we are because they need us. Who's going to give the last rites to a sick person in the middle of a war if there are no priests? Who is going to confess them, to preach to them, to bring them the Blessed Sacrament? It doesn't even occur to us to want to leave. Could something bad happen to us? Yes, something could happen to us. But for example, we've spent 6 or 7 years here, and so far, not even a scratch. The bishop has been here for 15 years and has never been hurt. Maybe next week they'll announce that we've all died, or we could spend another 40 years here without anything happening to us. You never know. You have to do what you have to do while there is time, as Jesus Christ says. And there's a lot to do, so for us, staying is the only option. And for us, it's truly an honor to be working with confessors of the faith and martyrs. No one is worthy of such a blessing. Recovering the cities is fundamental. It's not the complete solution, of course. We have to do it with the greatest sense of caution, because retaliations against the civil population is asking for a war in the future. But the Islamic State has to be driven out of the country because they hate God and they hate people. Imagine that right now dolls have been found in the city where they have abandoned, but they are filled with explosives so that the children who pick them up will die. These people hate humans, and so they definitely have to be driven out. Without a doubt, it's part of the solution. Not the complete solution, but part of it. On the way to Mosul, there have already been some Christian cities that have been freed, and that has brought a lot of hope to the Christians to be able to return there. It won't be possible right away because they have to finish freeing Mosul first, which is the most difficult part. The battle continues because then we have to clear landmines that the Islamic State left in these cities, and the bombs, including homemade ones, that they've left in strange places, as I said before, in dolls or in refrigerators. After that, there's the role of rebuilding. 60% of the houses have been burned, 100% of the churches have been burned or destroyed. All of this requires reconstruction. But it's true that this is very hopeful because up until now, no one has done anything to free the city. 2 years have gone by, wasted. Finally, something is being done. And so the Christians are regaining the hope of returning to their cities. And they want to. Not those who were from Mosul. Those who were from Mosul don't want to return because their very neighbors who are Muslims betrayed them. But the cities that were all Christian want to go back, and they're looking forward to it. We have been in the celebrations because in the refugee camps they celebrate this. It has truly brought them new life. And then we have the problem of post-Mosul, because there are a lot of internal divisions in the country among the Kurds and the Baghdad government. Even Turkey has gotten involved. International interests keep slipping into the country, bringing destruction and chaos. There's a lot to be done. We don't even know if the country will be able to recover its unity, or if it will end up being divided in 3 parts, as some people are already calling for. So basically there's a lot of work, but what is being done to free the cities from the Islamic State is definitely a necessary and important step. Then we have to fight for reconciliation, to work together. The problem is that there is a lot of division and hatred from all of these post-war years, and the international interests that keep wanting to get involved without thinking about the good of the people. So we'll see what happens. This war in Syria, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, was all based on lies, weapons of mass destruction that they knew did not exist. The war was started for geopolitical reasons, petroleum, the arms market, etc. They sell it to the worldwide public based on false reasons. What's even worse is what is still happening in Syria. They are presenting the Arab Spring as a reality when it never really happened. There is an interest in dividing the countries, etc. Regional powers are directly backing the extremists, the jihadists, the terrorists, powers that are sectors from the West. This means that, humanly speaking, it's difficult to see a solution to the conflict because there is still destruction of entire cities for mere economic interests. The Islamic State and the other religious fanatics who blaspheme the holy name of God in using it for violence commit a grave crime. But the ones who have the same guilt, if not more, are the people with suits and ties thousands of miles away who support the terrorists in order to sell weapons or to gain access to petroleum or to improve their geopolitical situation or to weaken their enemy. These are people who don't get their hands dirty, but their souls are filthy from the harm that they are causing. In that sense, the people in the West are being deceived because they are being lied to. There's a saying that goes, "In war, the first victim is the truth." We see that constantly. There are interests that present as a reality something that is not. For example, Aleppo was sold 5 years ago by terrorists, but these terrorists were being backed up. Back then, no one said anything, but now they're about to be defeated. They're trying to avoid this from happening. It's crazy, but it's the reality that we are facing here. What these powers have done is deplorable in backing the extreme terrorists just for economic reasons. In some cases, we could say that they could not have done it any worse. These are crimes that cry out to heaven. In Syria, the people are very happy with how Russia has acted because in supporting the army, it has helped to strike a heavy blow to terrorism. In fact, ever since Russia has entered into the conflict, terrorism has begun to decline. Other than that, how these powers have acted has been disappointing. For me, in a lot of cases, even criminal. Will the countries recover? We don't know. They say that Iraq itself will become divided. There are people on the outside, the ones who support the terrorists, who say that the best thing is to divide it. This gives me the impression that this is what they have been pursuing from the beginning. With Syria, they are trying to do the same, and we don't know what will happen. The level of confrontation, violence, and hatred in these countries makes it impossible to foretell if unity will return. Anyways, no one knows. We'll have to see how things continue. Yes, there are different rites. There are, for example, the patriarchs and the Chaldean bishops who are Catholic. There are the Syrian Catholic bishops, the Armenian Catholic bishops, the Latin bishops, who of course are of the Catholic rite. And then there is the counterpart of the Oriental rites, the Orthodox, which are Assyrian, Armenian Orthodox, Syrian Orthodox. And congregations, there aren't many, and foreign missionaries, we aren't that many. But it is true that there are congregations that have Iraqi vocations, and most now are the Dominicans. But there are also the Carmelites, the Sisters of Mother Teresa are all foreigners. They're there in Baghdad. There are the Redemptorists, and so there are quite a few compared to other places. So we have very few foreigners. The work they carry out is very important. There are sisters that have hospitals and schools. The Dominicans have an open university. There is much pastoral work and social work that the church carries out, as it does throughout the entire world, right? I have already said that nobody wants to leave. No, it seems strange to us that we are asked that question. leave when the Christian people need us the most, it seems a contradiction to us. There is a saying that may seem funny at first, but when they ask me, what are you doing in Iraq? I say, what are you doing that you are not in Iraq? We have become a people of martyrdom, and that is a great grace, right? Here in Spain, in Barbastro, during the Civil War, numerous religious were killed, priests and lay faithful. But the entire Claretian seminary was killed, 51 martyrs. At night, when they took them out by groups to be murdered, those who remained knelt down at the feet of those who were being taken away, because the ones being taken away had been chosen by Christ. They were considered worthy by Christ to become martyrs, because for those who remained, this was not yet the case. But they felt moved to kiss their feet, because they said, we felt honored because we were sharing this room with these men who were going to be martyrs. It's not our turn yet. Well, that's the same feeling that we have here. We're serving a martyred people. Leave here? No. It has to be said that the majority have left the country. Before the war, there was 1.5 million, but now there is a total of 300,000 left. The ones who left were those who had more economic means, and yet many of those who remain still want to leave. It's understandable, because in the end, a young married couple that has 1 or 2 children, they fear for them. The child is in school and they can't be sure if something is not going to happen to him there. For example, 20 meters from the bishop's residence, they planted a bomb that was discovered in time, thanks be to God. They planted a bomb. Why? Because in front of the bishop's residence there is a school, so the bomb was to go off when the children were to come out at the end of the school day. That's to say, it is very difficult for the people in Syria to make the decision to stay here. Therefore, many leave. Some stay because they don't have means, others stay for the good of the country. But there have been many years of attacks, of war and persecution. It's not just 2 years, as many people think, that the Islamic State is here. No. We're talking about the year 2013. That is why the majority has left, and the majority that remain also want to leave. However, there is some hope now that the army has taken possession again of the Christian towns on the plain of Nineveh that the Islamic State had captured 2 years ago. And many people are hoping to return soon. It won't be that soon, but anyway, they are hopeful, and that gives some vitality. Many that have left are going to find things very difficult from how they were before. And we know people, not only in America, but also in Europe, especially young people, who have regretted having left and want to return. But it will be difficult because they sold everything so that they could leave. It's very difficult. Perhaps some will return when things get better. That's if they do get better. The truth is that the country is a mess. It's divided in 3, and there will be an internal struggle now to see how it can all be settled, because there are international interests that are not in favor of unity. Yes, that refugee camp is relatively small. There are 135 families, perhaps 600 people. It's small compared to those in Erbil. In Erbil, there are more than 100,000 in one refugee camp. These are Christian camps, not to mention the Muslim camps, which are enormous. These refugee camps are better than those in many other places. The situation is very difficult for everyone. For example, in Erbil, in a trailer of 3 by 9 meters, there are 2 families or 3. Yet on the other hand, in Baghdad, there is 1 per trailer, 1 family. In that sense, it is much better. There is privacy. It was made better, we learned from our experience of previous refugee camps. So instead of having public kitchens, a cooker was put in each trailer. If the family has greater privacy, it's easier to lead a more normal life. All the same, it's still very difficult. There's a shortage of space. We went around once to see who was without a bed, and they said, we need 6 beds, but there's only room for 2 beds. The rest have to use mattresses on the floor that they take out and put them away in the morning. So they don't even have space for the bed. These are basic things. It's difficult, right? Yet they are better off than the refugee camps in Kurdistan, which are extremely populated. They're the people from the north who fled from the Islamic State. The great difficulty in Baghdad is that there is more insecurity. In Erbil there is no insecurity, but in Baghdad there is. So therefore, for example, we have special transportation to take the children to school. But the mothers didn't want their younger children to leave the camps. So for them we built a child center for inside the camp because they're afraid of the attacks outside. Oh, their difficulties are different from ours, yet both have difficulties. They are living persons with whom you can speak, persons who love and protect us. In general, the Christians in the East, more so those who have suffered direct persecution, but the Christians in general, they all dialogue with God and with the Virgin Mary. For them, they are not persons that are far off. They are right here by our side. I can tell you horrible stories of how they had to flee during the night, how on the way they could not endure anymore, how they lost everything, lost even their family members. On finishing their stories, teary-eyed, they said, God is generous. This is something unanimous. All of them see the protecting hand of God with them. All of them pray with faith. They have a beautiful devotion to the Blessed Mother. They know for certain that our Lord and the Blessed Virgin are with them. Although it may seem that this is not the case, they know that it is true. Their faith is very deep. This is the reason why, in the midst of all these difficulties, they are able to live in peace. Even, we may say, in general, they live with more joy than the people in the West who seem to have everything. Yes, of course, it is full of amazing testimonies. So many people who have died for Christ, and those who continue alive and are persecuted for Christ's sake. In the attack at Christina, I was impressed by the reaction of some of the Christians. They got up knowing they were going to be killed. They had them all piled up together in the center of the church with explosive belts on. And some men, moved by a holy zeal, stood up, calling their assassins to conversion. And they stood up knowing that they were going to die. One can read the testimonies in the book of the Maccabees of the 7 brothers that were killed and their mother as well, how they rebuked the king. And one reads these testimonies and it seems to be the same as what is happening now. People who knew that they were going to die, and yet all the same they called their killers to conversion, and they died saying, "Long live the cross of Christ." The cross for them is something real. They were living it and they gave their blood for Christ. These are very impressive testimonies. The other things that call your attention are the testimonies of forgiveness. Faith that leads to absolute and complete forgiveness. Parents whose young daughter had been kidnapped in an Islamic state pray for the conversion of that Islamic state. It's very impressive. People who have lost everything and yet say, "I am grateful to this Islamic state because before, like a fool, I used to worry about silly things. But once I lost everything, I grew closer to Jesus Christ." The mother of 2 of the Coptics who were beheaded in Libya has an incredible testimony. It was most difficult for the mother as she saw a video of how they beheaded both of them. They then hanged their heads in public for everyone to see. When they asked her if she were to meet the murderers of her sons at the door of her house, what would she say to them? She said, I would invite them in for coffee because they were responsible for my son's entrance into heaven. These testimonies are much more incredible even than martyrdom. There is so much of this. There are also people who say, Father, help us, but in reality they end up forgiving everyone. And with such liberty that shows that they are heroes. Because if one looks at this on a human level, he who kills and threatens and expels, they seem to be the ones that are running things, but in fact it is the other way around. They're just slaves of Satan and of their passions. Those who are truly free are the Christians, who have the power to forgive even an offense that seems unforgivable. They resemble Jesus Christ in a unique way. Yes, the church has always been close to the faithful. It has suffered a decline, bishops assassinated, priests kidnapped, and the same goes for religious kidnappings and assassinations. A great number of the faithful too. The church has always been there for them. Concretely speaking, the refugee issue is incredible. The church has built towns, built cities and schools. When one sees it, it's hard to believe. You go to those refugee camps and see that everything that's built there is thanks to all the help from outside. It's something that amazes you. How it all has worked for the good of the children. It's true that we have to try to do more, yes, yet what has been done already is also a lot. One learns something new there every day. This should be the case for any priest, right? Learn from others, because the priest is a sinner like the rest and he has to learn from others. The thing is that in those places where there is persecution, one learns a lot. It's very palpable. What I mentioned before, the example of forgiveness, it's easy to say that I have to forgive. It's easy to forgive if it's something small. But to reach the point where you forgive things that are really serious, with such goodwill, with peace and joy, this is something that makes us question ourselves. As I have already said, it causes a sensation of unworthiness. One sees so many, it shocks you. You ask yourself, would I be capable of this? It's very, very striking, you know. The examples of faith, the examples of perseverance, the examples of forgiveness, of mercy, there are many striking and impressive things. It teaches us to step up, not only in our faith as Christians, but in our priesthood too. A priest has to be a victim with Christ. And one learns from them because they are the true victims. So this enriches our life significantly. I like what a young man that visited Iraq the other day said. He said, I didn't go so much to Iraq to help them, but so that they could help us. I can say without a doubt that we receive more than what we give. We receive an incredible amount. We are the communion of saints. Now, the communion of saints means the good that I do here profits the whole church. Well, the good that they are doing is enormous because they are suffering for Jesus Christ. They have lost everything and they are all being killed. These goods have an impact on us. We are in great debt to them, and what we do is try to return a little, that's all. When we have to give talks in the West, we always encounter two particular things. A lot of ignorance about this topic, people who are amazed when they hear the things we say. They weren't informed by those who should have informed them. But secondly, we see that there is a lot of interest. Yes, people show solidarity. Yes, people want to unite themselves to the sufferings of our Christians. They say, what concrete things can we do? We always answer the same thing. First, pray. We are Christian, and for us prayer is not just repeating nice words. A real dialogue with God where we implore help. Prayer moves mountains, as Jesus Christ said. We ask that everyone pray for the persecuted Christians. There can be no excuses. Everyone can do this. Prayers and sacrifices. In the second place, make sure that you know what is happening, because it is not known. In your home, your workplaces, in your environments, through the mass media. 4 years ago, more or less, I was in Baghdad, and what did I see? I saw that people were dying there every day, practically every day, and it's not made known. If in an attack 40 people are killed, it doesn't merit a single headline in the West. If 40 more die, maybe a little paragraph. I said, it can't be that the people are not interested. I am going to do my part at least. For this reason, we started our Facebook page and blog, Friends of Iraq. And what happened? Hundreds of thousands of people were interested in it. It is the work of an amateur. It tells a little bit about what is happening, and yet every year there are millions of people who have shown interest and supported us. In Syria, we're doing the same thing with the Facebook page, SOS Christians in Syria. I ask everyone to share through the mass media the truth of what is happening in these places, and leave us your message of support. This is what we say to people from Colombia, Venezuela, Argentina, Spain, France. They sent us prayers, and this is a great consolation for the people. It's difficult to live alone. When you know that you're not alone, this consoles you. So, not just to pray, but to make it known, because there is a lot of interest, but there is very little information. When someone clicks I like on a Facebook page or shares the news, what occurs is that 50, 100 people find out about this, and then there are 100 people praying. This does a lot. It does a world of good to us. Christ says, a cup of water that you give to a disciple of mine will not go without reward. Imagine what you can do for these persecuted Christians. It will not be left without reward. Perhaps your click sent makes it possible for others to give help where you are unable to. That is going to help and save lives. Christ said, he who helps the least of these because they are my disciples will receive a disciple's reward. That means he who helps a persecuted Christian, a martyr, or a witness to the faith will receive that reward. And we can do this by simply sharing something. Thirdly, economic help. There is a country to be rebuilt, a multitude of refugees to maintain, food, medicine, school transport, schools. Now we have to rebuild entire cities. Specifically speaking, in our blogs you can send a donation by payment. With a little help, you can do a lot. I want to repeat something that Bishop Amel Nona, Bishop of Mosul, said, who came here. He lost his entire diocese, Chaldean bishop. The city of Mosul practically disappeared. He was left without Christians. And he said, don't be afraid to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what we ask for. We need a Europe with a strong Christian faith, that you not be ashamed of the Christian faith. What we are asking is that each and everyone live their Christian faith. Because if you live your Christian faith, you can change the world for the better. Because if you live your Christian faith, you become more charitable. What is the Islamic State? It's the proof of how far hatred can go in the human heart when one allows it to enter in. This can be counterattacked by Christian charity. Charity is all-powerful because God is charity. Our duty as Christians is to proclaim our faith, to strive to be saints, to improve our charity towards our neighbor. And this way we can change the world. For some, it may sound like empty words, something that just sounds very nice. Well, the one who thinks so is not Christian. Mother Teresa changed herself, and in doing so, she also changed the world. The world is a far better place thanks to her. If we do the same, we can also change the world. Therefore, this is the most effective way to fight against groups in Islamic states that spread hatred.